tonight's meeting. I'm Rory Vaughan, Chair of the Economy, Arts, Sports and Public Realm Policy and Accountability Committee. So before we begin, just the usual housekeeping points. First of all, the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. So by taking part, you're consenting to be recorded. Secondly, please can officers introduce themselves before speaking for the first time? And if the fire alarm sounds either continuously or intermittently, I'll adjourn the meeting. Officers will direct you to the nearest assembly point in Shortlands Road. So please leave in an orderly fashion by the nearest exit, which is in the lift lobby and down the stairs. So before we get onto the agenda, I'm proposing that the running order is changed. So we're taking the visitor economy item first, because we've very kindly got an external speaker and guest who's going to be contributing to the item. So that will then be followed by the waste collection report and finally the London Borough of Culture bid. So thank you to all in advance for that slight change. So that's what I have to say about the agenda. So first of all, have we got any apologies for absence?
No, Chair.
And secondly, do members have any declarations of interest? No. Okay. And do members agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of July 2023? Agreed? Great. Thank you very much. So, without further ado, on to what is now the first item, which is an emerging approach to developing and promoting our visitor economy. I think I'm handing over, first of all, to John Pixton, who's the Strategic Director of Economy, for some introductory remarks. John, thank you very much for attending. Over to you.
Thanks, Councillor Vaughan. So to set out the paper, the visitor economy provides services to tourists and other forms of visitors, including business visitors, whether they come from very local places or internationally. And it's an important part of H&F's wider economy, sitting here between central London and Heathrow. And here we have a wide and diverse arts and cultural scene, lots of rich heritage, sports, diverse retail scene, our riverside location, and many, many more attractions to visitors. It's an exciting time in place to do this. Overseas visitor numbers to London have bounced back to almost pre-COVID levels in the quarter to June 2023, just about 60,000 short of their 2019 high. And there's about a spend of 4.3 billion in the London visitor economy. As just your strategy recognises, a focus on quality placemaking, sense of place, and the importance in the attraction of the borough to people who live, work, invest, play, and visit here is vital to our economy. And it's also vital to what people get from life and the well-being and how they engage with the borough. And this is commonplace across the country. Many councils are thinking about their visitor economies and how to gain more from it and how to really deepen that sense of place. But we're not starting from scratch in H&F. As I said, you're well placed geographically, we're well placed in terms of existing offer, but also that through the industrial strategy, the Arts Commission and our cultural strategy, there's been lots of groundwork here and strategies that really intertwine and form a holistic offer across culture, community and economy. And as you'll hear later on this evening, there's a close fit between visitor economy and our London Borough Culture bid that's been devised. And the council has a long-standing commitment as well to many of our cultural institutions, which are a key draw of visitors, involving being a key stakeholder or a funder of them or supporter of them or councillors sitting on boards. So there's a lot of engagement and partnership in the borough involving the council, and there's a lot of work done more independently by other institutions around this. So, there's a kind of key question here about the value add of the council and the role of the council in helping institutions make the most of their offer, helping residents engage and value the visitor economy, and also to help promote it beyond our borders, be that locally, nationally or internationally. So a couple of kind of key questions we think members may want to consider as David presents the paper is, what do you see the council's role in the visitor economy and how that might develop, and how can we best add value to what our partners do, and what our communities do, and what our institutions do, and do the activities set out and suggested in the paper resonate and is there anything else that needs adding or finessing? So thank you for your time, and I'll pass to David.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat anything that John has said, but I'm going to run through a few slides that just walks members through the paper. I think they're going to miraculously appear on the screen and for the live stream as we speak. So as John mentioned, just skipping onto the first slide, if we could, work on the visitor economy isn't altogether new for the council, and it does have some strategic anchoring, if you like, both in the work that has been done over a number of years around the industrial strategy and looking very much at the borough as a place to live, work and invest, but also to visit. And there are a lot of intertwining factors that make that focus on the visitor economy tightly aligned with what we might push as for the borough as a place to invest and for our residents as a place to live as well. John also mentioned the cultural strategy, which I know this committee has had sight of in the run up to it being approved by Cabinet last month. And there's a very key focus within that strategy on destination particularly, and the value of that to the borough, to residents, to people who work here and to people who invest. So work on the visitor economy that I'm going to run you through is quite timely, I think it's fair to say, and we have a new member of the team, Logan, to my left, who joined us just a few months ago to work up this area as visitor economy officer. So just moving on to the next slide, and I'll try and keep my introductory comments quite brief. You have had the paper in advance. John mentioned we're not starting from scratch in Hammersmith and Fulham. Many boroughs outside of central London are. We already do have a strong established, very rich offer spanning various different categories, if you like. We detailed them in slightly more detail in the paper, but you'll see culture and heritage, no surprise to anyone here. There's a rich cultural offer, whether it be theatres, music, history, more besides. There's a lot in that area that people do visit Hammersmith and Fulham for, and that we can do more to raise the awareness of those and to drive visitor numbers. Sports and leisure, of course, is important. We often hear about the fact that the borough is the only place in the country with three major football clubs that we have, so a big draw there as well. But leisure in the round more widely, and of course shopping, dining, and staying in the borough is a big area of priority as well. And we do have an external speaker, in fact, from the Novotel, whom you'll hear from shortly. And finally, but by no means least important, is the borough's breadth of green spaces, both the riverside location, quite an asset, of course, but also more green spaces and parks besides, that people both who live in the borough visit, but also those outside come to the visit to the borough specifically to see. So a lot there already. We're not starting from scratch, as I say. Just moving on to the next slide then. The paper illustrates some of the challenges that the borough faces in both attracting and managing visitors. Just to name some of those, there's not an awful lot of recognition of the borough itself as a place to visit. Some recognition certainly of the places within it and of the individual attractions, but much less of those as being part of Hammersmith and Fulham as a borough. So that's an issue. Only a very limited amount of place-based promotion branding is really undertaken. And when I talk about place, it's really the key places within the borough, whether we think about the town centres or particular localities. So very, very much underway, led by individual institutions on that front, but much less around a place, if you like. We know it's a competitive landscape. London attracts visitors, of course, largely to central London, and I'll talk in a moment about work that the Mayor's Agency for promotion of London is keen to do to draw visitors outside of the centre of London and towards other places. But the fact is, it's very competitive as a market. So an increasing need to look at what is the role for the local authority in that. And of course, John touched on numbers of visitors to London bouncing back to somewhere near their high. That's not to say there aren't challenges on the back of the pandemic and change patterns, and it might be that Elaine, our guest speaker, touched on this later, but of course the market has changed and people's habits in leisure time have changed immeasurably. So lots to grapple with. Moving on to the next slide then. What we're doing internally to start to look at this, and what we didn't want to present is a lot of ideas for consideration, but also wanted to cite you on some of the work already underway to move this forward, if you like, around quick wins, for want of a better term. We have recently established quite an informal tourism network, bringing together some of the key players across the borough who are active. That hadn't been happening. We've been looking at hotels, retailers, music venues, theatres, more besides. They're often not brought together into one place to share their common challenges or issues and to network. That's something we put in place, and it appears to have been valued by people who've been involved in that. We've started some engagement with London and Partners, which, as you might know, is the Mayor's agency for promoting London, looking at how we make best use of their resources, whether it be for promoting the borough as part of London's wider offer, or indeed looking at their visitor experience strategy, into which they've put a lot of effort looking at the key challenges and issues for visitors to London and how individual places across the capital can help to deal with those. So we have some good relationships there. As part of wider work to look at a place-based approach to the borough town centre improvements and so on, we're also looking at where the visitor economy and driving tourism can sit within that, thinking specifically, but not only, about the Civic Campus and King Street, of course, and wider work to improve that as a place, but thinking of the visitor aspect to that as well, and also North End Road. And you'll note in the paper that we're starting work on a marketing strategy specifically for North End Road, knowing that that's something of a hidden gem, if you will. There's a manifesto commitment, as you'll be well aware, to revive the Shepherd's Bush Comedy Festival. We're starting to look in earnest as to what that might entail. And again, what the role for the council in getting that back off the ground would be. It had a good start prior to the pandemic. It hasn't taken place since. So we're looking at ways of bringing in a private provider to recommence that and start to think about how that can drive wider economic benefit through increased visitor numbers. And finally, something that we will have, which members might not yet be aware of, is looking at larger events that come to the borough and thinking about how we can convene around those to ensure we really make the most of them taking place. One particularly relevant example at the moment is London Tech Week, which is due to come to Olympia in June, a very big event, attracting a lot of business the visitors and fringe events and more besides. It will be taking place in Olympia, and the agency running it, again, London and Partners, is very keen to work with us. And one of the key aspects there can be how can we really harness the value of the considerable number of often high spending visitors who will be attending events of that nature. So lots underway already, really quick wins, things that we can do relatively straightforwardly. On the next slide, if we could move on, what we've tried to set out in the paper is also a set of ideas, proposals, if you like, of what more we could do to take this forward as an agenda. I've set out some of those in the slide here, and Logan's detailed them in the paper. We touch on the idea of a destination management plan or partnership. Places typically have those, not always or uniquely led by the local authority by any means, but a mechanism which does feature in the cultural strategy as an ambition of how a place can be managed and promoted in all the senses you'd expect to see for visitors coming to it, whether it be community safety or wayfinding or branding or marketing, all sorts of things generally driven forward by a partnership of organisations with a stake in an area, including the local authority. So scoping something around that is something we're suggesting is well worth pursuing. Bringing together hotels and conference centres more actively to look at what more could be done collaboratively with those to drive visitor numbers and make the most of visitors being here in the borough. Also looking at the creation of new products. What we're not proposing in the paper is that the council take the lead in all or any of these, but there are a number of ideas set out in the paper around both promotion and management of the place for visitors that the council could either kickstart or work with organisations to get off the ground, to do something slightly more creative in the borough than maybe is already underway. Some work with our neighbours is something we've been looking at scoping, and particularly the idea, and this ties in with the Mayor of London's priorities for driving visitors out of central London and dispersing them across attractions in the capital more widely, how we could look at some kind of zone 2 marketing offer, if you will, taking inspiration from a plan that's already in implementation in Berlin to do much the same thing, to raise awareness of attractions that already have visitors, but could certainly do more with some greater push. And just finally, some ideas around that we know are already in train for wider purposes, but do have a visitor focus too, chiefly among the nighttime economy. So what more we do to make that a safer proposition, to work with attractions in that area to open for longer, and how that can play into how we manage and retain visitors in the borough as well. So just moving on into what our next steps are to sum up what we're putting to this committee in the paper. We're very keen to have feedback and steer from you on these as ideas and of the focus for our work. But as John mentioned, your views on how you see the council's role in this particular area. It's not a statutory area of work. It's not one necessarily that the council would lead all areas in, but there is a role for us potentially as convener. So some ideas from you would be very welcome on where we best add value, given how much is underway, largely led by individual attractions. And of course, whether the ideas that we're setting out here in the paper resonate, if there are any points of steer or additional areas that we might have missed, which is quite possible. I'll leave it there, but very happy to take questions or comments.
Thank you very much, John and David. We're lucky enough to be joined, I think it's Elaine Ranahan. Yes. From Novotel. Did you want to make some comments now or leave them to later? I think we can do both, of course, about if you wanted to add anything at this stage, that'd be great. And we can come back later as well as necessary.
Not really. I mean, I think just for us, my name is Elaine Ranahan. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at the hotel. So literally your neighbours here. I think just to kind of add on to that Hammersmith as a destination is extremely important to us as a business, and everything that is offered as an ancillary service to our guests. So we have a wide variety of segments that we work with. So we are a conference and events hotel. We deal with the international sector, the US and Canada in particular. A lot of our business is European, the mini congresses that come to here. And then of course, we also supply the local and the UK domestic market as well. We have a very strong leisure and tourism market. Again, it's far reaching. So we have clients coming from Australia, the US, Latin America, Asia, and again, then a stronghold from the European market and the UK domestic. We also have a very strong corporate base, local area and then the transient that comes to us. So for us, I think the services and everything that goes with it that is in the area for Hammersmith is extremely important to us. So things like you mentioned the Olympia Exhibition Centre, there's a lot of business, I think, that comes out of that to a lot of businesses here, including us as well. The Eventum Apollo, the Lyric Theatre. We are also affiliated with London & Partner, who are a member, and we do quite a lot of work with them. And then obviously things like having the transport links, the activities in the shopping in the local area, because for all the facets of our business, all of the people that come to stay in the hotel, they do come out of the hotel and come into the local area and avail of the services. So for us, we very much support any initiatives and endeavours that are coming into promoting Hammersmith as a destination.
Thank you very much. Just move on to members of the committee who've got some comments. So, Councillor Lang.
Thank you very much. It ties in quite well with the other items on the agenda tonight. So forgive me if I sort of move between the two. I've always felt, I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes, that East London's got a much better deal than West London. West is best, but you know, with the Olympics and then with all the developments around there. And so I very welcome this work. But I want to just stress a couple of things. The diversity of our population already, our community in Hammersmith and Fulham, we're very diverse, extremely diverse. If you take Uxbridge Road, it's got the most diverse restaurants in a street in London. Yep, that's where I live, and that's why I live there. So, and also, I'll just give another example. The Hoxton Hotel, which has just recently opened on Shepherd's Bush Green, which I can barely afford to eat in, but I have been in there. Nevertheless, they market themselves because of the music venues, because of Westfield Shopping Centre, and also because they say they're right next to Portobello Market, which isn't quite true, but anyway. But they've seen that, and they seem to be full every time I've been in there and spoken to them. So that's a good example, I think. But I think we ought to get the balance as well in this development, building from what we've already got. You know, you mentioned the football teams, the walks that we've now got with Nubian Jack and the Black History Month, they are fantastic. And the work that the school kids did on that recently, I think that's quite innovative compared with other London boroughs. And I will say this, I know they're sitting over there, the events team here, we've got a very, very good events team that do look at things in that way. But I think it's just getting the balance. And I'll just finish by saying I'm a councillor for Brook Green. And so I was only elected 18 months ago, but I've been helping residents with the developments at Olympia, most of which they support. But there is a balance. There is a balance about what the residents need, as well as all-night events and so on. We've had some issues with those, but nevertheless, I think we can manage those in the future. And again, I think that looking at AEG, who run Hammersmith Apollo, I think they might even run Shepherd's Bush Empire. They certainly run parts of Olympia. I mean, that's going to attract a lot of people in. And the football clubs do as well. We've got three, you know, I was going to say 3 Premier League football clubs, but QPR might get there one day. But a lot of people come to watch football and they stay overnight. I go and watch football, and that's what we do. You know, so it's ways of looking at what is needed. And I think perhaps I would just urge you to do a little bit more asking residents what they want, especially young people, but also asking other groups, you know, focus group of people that are coming here to watch QPR play or coming to watch a concert. Would they stay overnight and put money into the, you know, into King Street shops and so on, and restaurants? I've just been into a new restaurant that's opened just down the road, fish restaurant, just to see what they're offering. Fantastic. Really good value, actually. And they're giving 15% off to local residents. So they've decided to locate here. I just think that we've got a golden opportunity here, which we can use. But I would just urge a little bit of taking people with us as we proceed down this track, because economically it's obviously a success, but we want a vibrant community to live in. That's why I live here. That's why I don't come from London, but I've come to live in Hammersmith and Fulham. So I want that to continue, but in a managed way, if you understand what I'm saying. So I welcome all that you're doing. And finally, sorry, Chair, a resident came to see me and my councillor colleague at our surgery last week about a William Morris project, right? Really great project. This is just a local artist, just saying, what could we do about that? And although we do celebrate William Morris here, we maybe could celebrate him a bit more, actually, I think. I was reflecting on that after he went. And so there's a lot of ideas within our community. That's what I'm probably saying, as well as beyond, in order to make this a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know if you want to respond to any of that, but sorry, one thing I'd add on the top of that, and I think it's sort of maybe what you're saying, Councillor Lang, is what is the sort of profile of people who are, I mean, you mentioned some of this, Elaine, the profile of people who are visiting in terms of presumably people are staying at the Novotel, staying at other hotels, guest houses, visitors either staying to watch football, go to concerts. Are we sort of, I'm assuming there's a sort of, well, you tell me, I suppose, short-term stay market where people are coming for a night, 2 nights to go to central London or do something specifically here. And I guess the question is then, is there other stuff on that they would, you know, in Hammersmith, Shepherd's Bush, Fulham, that would attract them? Presumably during the summer, people are coming for sort of longer time. So I just wonder what the sort of, you know, data that you've got is as to what sort of visitors what visitors do we actually have in the borough, I guess.
If I may just respond quickly to Councillor Lang's point and then hand over some of your questions, Councillor Vaughan. Completely agree about the place-based approach. Councillor Vaughan and I have talked with other councillors about Shepherd's Bush. So David referenced the work we're doing on King Street and the work we're doing on North End Road. This is about adopting a place-based approach, thinking about what assets are in those areas, be they cultural institutions, be they, you know, particular places people want to visit, working with residents as we have and continue to do, for example, in North End Road, and thinking about what that shared vision is. So the marketing strategy for North End Road they would refer to, that's not cooked up by us as council officers. you know, in here. It's based on communication. Councillor Holden may want to come in and comment on this already. And the same thing for King Street, you know, really close working with businesses, great to Novotel here as well, to think about what that vision is, to put forward what those assets are, but do it in a way which feels local, place-based, doesn't feel like it could be anywhere. And I completely agree with you, William Morris. Adult education colleagues in my team already do a lot with them, but I think there's always more we can do. And I think the idea is that there are layers of this, that we promote places which people recognise. You know, people know Northern Road, people know King Street, but then it forms part of a wider borough offer. And David will come in about then the tactics we can use to get people to stay longer by doing schemes which encourage people to spend money at X, Y, Z. But just on the numbers, David.
I think one thing to flag is that what we've put in the paper at the moment is largely based on extensive conversations locally with stakeholders, and we've identified 3 potential target markets, which almost segments the types of groups we might look at. One being residents and their friends and family, of course. The second being leisure tourists, and again based on conversations with a lot of the stakeholders, Novotel included locally, and the third being business and conference visitors, because we know they're increasingly important to London and they do often come to Hammersmith. What we don't have yet, and what we hopefully will have from London and partners, is much more in the way of granular data as to exactly where people come from, how long they stay when they do stay, and then to Andrew's point, looking at, well, what are the tactics to increase a day visitor to a weekend visitor. There's a lot of work underway at London level to do exactly that, because typically for London as a whole, people come, they spend their time in central London, and then they don't go elsewhere. So the measures will be, how can you extend that stay? And if you extend that stay, how can that be to the benefit of other parts of London? So we don't have the data specifically yet, but we hope to, for exactly those reasons, really.
Councillor Patel.
I just wanted to confirm what Councillor Lang has said. I've lived in this borough for 40 years, and it's a wonderful place. There's for a little borough, it kicks more than its size. I always believe that the season starts off with the Oxford Cambridge boat race in Putney Bridge. Then you have the Queen's Club with the tennis, which is only second to Wimbledon. Then you have the polo matches at Hurlingham. And then you have the film shows by the river and all sorts of events. One thing which I found incredible was that at page 24 of the report, under paragraph 16, you're still considering to put up a visitor website. I mean, I would have thought that's a pretty simple thing to do. And it'd be nice to actually have that with a chronology of events running from January to December, telling the public exactly what's happening. And I think that will draw a lot of people and a lot of attention to what a great borough this is to live in and the attraction it has. I think to some extent, something like that would probably draw more attention than central London, which is now becoming very overcrowded. Here we have much more space. And I think I would like someone's comments on why the website has not been actually up and running already.
I think that's a very valid comment. We've been working with comms colleagues on this, and it is something that, as you say, Councillor Patel, can be relatively easily done. What is already in place, and could, I suspect, be translated into a website presence relatively easily, is the monthly What's On newsletter, which I suspect members see. I'm always quite impressed at how long it is and how much is in there. So I think our task, even at a very basic level, is to look at how that could be translated to the website. In conversations with our comms colleagues, quite sensibly, the advice has been that if we're to invest in any kind of website, we need to look at what real cut through it can have quite often. And I'm not a web or comms expert, but it can often be very difficult to get cut through. Some content can sit statically without a very substantial investment. So I suspect the balance might be between having something there and present, which currently isn't the case in one single place. There are lots of places on the council's website that do talk about things happening, but they're not collated in one single place, and quite how much resource is placed into that. But we can certainly take that away and work it up with the comms team.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, you know, a successful website will be part of a kind of wider engagement through social media and other types of channels. And your point in chronology is absolutely right. And it's about the kind of user experience and how someone's wanting to search. So maybe they're looking by place, Shepherd's Bush, Hammersmith, Fulham, etc. Or maybe they're looking by kind of theme, you know, they're after sports related activities, or, you know, perhaps they want to see that kind of chronology through the year. So it's about having that information, as David says, collated, but also kind of searchable and sortable in a way that is user defined.
Yeah, sorry, just to take my prerogative in here. So I definitely agree about the What's On newsletter. That seems to be a fairly recent development that's got an enormous amount of stuff. I guess the question, sorry, about that and other things that are going on, and maybe Ms. Ranahan might want to come in here, is what do visitors find useful? Because some are sort of pitch up and want to find out what's there. Others are sort of, you know, from home thinking about this for months in advance sort of thing. So there are different types of consumers of that information, I guess. I guess the question is that sort of information freely available? And do guests and visitors see it and are pointed to it? And also, how can it be enhanced further? Because obviously, I mean, I know where the Apollo and stuff is, but, you know, visitors need to be pointed in the right direction, be that through actual physical maps, or, well, which they can probably do themselves these days, or by you know, understanding the public transport connections, for example, or yeah, it's simple stuff like that, I guess. I mean, I wonder if to some extent this might be something for your sort of informal and maybe more formal tourist network, which is, what do people want from that information? Some of which, you know, you're already putting together. You could probably enhance it by sort of saying, you know, which bus routes it is, or, you know, there may be just sort of other things that make it easier for people to consume that information and get to the places they want to go, for example. So I suspect there's understanding the visitors and what their needs are, and, you know, sharing that information as appropriate, and making sure it's getting into the hands of people who are, you know, can point, you know, particularly hotels and others who are pointing people in the right direction for that kind of information, be it for events or restaurants or whatever.
Yeah, just on that point, I mean, back to his place-based approach, my colleague Mark is there. You know, economy, economic development, public realm work very closely together, you know, on a daily basis. And I think getting that wayfinding right and investing in that is, you know, these are not separate policy agendas. It's all how it works together. And as you say, if you don't get that bit right, quality of street, quality of wayfinding, you're not going to deliver however good your web presence is, however good your events are. So it all needs to come together. Hence why we're, you know, working so closely together on this agenda. And it's definitely part of this delivery plan to improve, you know, for example, wayfinding down to the river. You know, if Julian was here, he would say most underused asset we've got.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think, you know, literally pointing people in the right direction is going to be the key to some of this. Councillor Borland, did you want to come in?
Thank you for the report. I wanted to understand better who we're trying to target, because it kind of appears to me that there might be different types of visitors. You've got people from abroad that are planning a trip, and are they going to plan a trip specifically to Hammersmith and Fulham? Then you've got people that are staying in central London, and you're talking about trying to pull them out to us. But then you've also got people that were using Hammersmith and Fulham as a base for their stay and are travelling into the city, centre of the city. So how do we keep them, you know, to stay with us for longer? So are we, which type of visitor, or are we just looking at them all? Is there a particular type that you're kind of targeting?
I think on that, it's fair to say it needs more thought, so that we are segmenting as cleverly as we can. And I think also with one eye on the art of the possible, and quite how much to the point of what the role of the council is as well. How much of that do we lead or enable, and how much is done through convening of third parties and stakeholders across the borough, who will each have slightly different areas of focus, as I'm sure the Novotel will attest, whether it be business visitors, as you say, which is a distinct market, or the others that you've mentioned. So we do need to bottom that out and be very clear, particularly when we come to matters around comms, for instance, who are we talking to about what, why, and where the cut through is. So we do need to make that much more specific, certainly.
And if I may just add, I mean, I think it kind of, as David inferred in the presentation, I mean, there'll be people who are new to visiting the borough, people very experienced. So you're looking at kind of creating additional trips, then kind of additional link trips while you're here. So maybe you're coming to the Apollo anyway, but you go for dinner locally, and then, you know, creating more overnight trips. So there's a number of different ways that we would seek to enhance and elongate and deepen that visitor experience to a multitude of different audiences. So I think, you know, as we come together increasingly as a partnership in the borough, you know, an organisation like Novotel would have much more detailed data on visitors than the council does currently. You know, we can assess that, and then when we have things like social media, websites, and you look at the hits. So gradually we're building up more of a kind of database, and then I guess the strategy can adapt iteratively to the evidence, be it reinforcing where we're successful, or perhaps, you know, being stronger in areas where we've been less successful.
Sorry, one more question. I noticed, I know this is, we're only in initial discussions, but I definitely think that one of the most exciting things that's happening in Fulham, in my ward in particular, is the redevelopment of Fulham Football Club and the opportunity to open up the riversides down in the River Walk. You know, we've all seen, I'm sure I have enjoyed summer's evenings by, you know, Battersea Power Station, and what that whole area, that whole space is just unrecognizable. And it's, you know, it's buzzy, it's al fresco dining, it's, you know, people meeting, it's, you know, it's a whole range of things. And we don't have, whilst we have kind of by the riverside, by Hammersmith Bridge, London as a whole doesn't really have that much riverside eating and drinking. So I'd be interested just to hear if you have any more information about how you think we can bring more people to that, and how we can work with that new space, because I think it's going to be really fantastic for the whole area.
I think just to come back on that, and Logan might wish to come in because he's had a number of conversations around, very informally initially, around how we can do more to attract visitors. I think it does come back to what the role of the council is. There's an awful lot underway, so the niche might be to find whether it can be through enhanced comms, through whatever platform that ends up being, if certainly the point around al fresco dining is quite a live one, and one we've cited specifically in the report, because there is a licensing element where the council plays quite a specific role in regulatory terms. So looking at what the barriers might be, and then also what the opportunities are, there almost certainly seems to be one around comms, and there's probably something around the wider nighttime economy licensing piece, which we are looking at, and a piece of work has been commissioned separately that will wrap in elements, I think, related. But Logan might wish to add around specifics, I suspect.
Hello, I'm Logan Smith, the Visitor Economy Officer. All our initial discussions have only been over the past couple of weeks with Fulham. They're very excited to work with us. That's one thing they've made clear. They've got a huge plan full of events in the lead up to the opening around this time this year. So it's getting the right councillors in to speak with them and seeing what we can do, because they're very keen, and we've got a big array, as I said, a big array of events, and it's going to do wonders for Hammersmith. But we want to turn that into like the town. Of Fulham, going to turn that into the town square of Fulham, really. So yeah, it'll be great.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Collins, you want to come in?
Which one is it? This one. I'd just like to, I can't sort of see like a brand of this that you're, I can't see anything emerging. It sounds like quite a lot of disconnected aspects to it. And I understand that probably reflects the fact that there's quite a lot of different communities here. But in terms of, you know, I do like Battersea. However, I do think it's been sort of socially cleansed, and it's just, and when you go there as a Londoner, I feel that they just, you know, there's nothing authentic about it. And one of the reasons that, you know, the East London has got such a good brand is because there's some authenticity to it. But we've got families here. We wanted to attract children to the area. There's quite a few families in South Fulham. But I think that if it does go where it's just about selling alcohol, keeping things open till late, you know, I'm the councillor for Ravenscourt ward, and I think they may not appreciate. They're already quite worried about crime and how that's going to be managed. Yeah, definitely, I think that's the main thing, really, the concept. And North End Road, the safety of that road. There's been a couple of safety issues there. And, I think it needs big thinking to sort of fix something like that. And so I know you're saying about the role of the council, but there's something that's very disconnected about the whole brand at the moment of what you can do. But I expect it will develop over time. Yeah. Thanks.
Just to come in briefly, I mean, your point about Battersea, I think part of the reason we're doing this, producing Quick Wins, producing a 3-year strategy, is to provide a clear direction and steer to stakeholders, be that Earls Court, for example, be it Olympia, Fulham Football Club, other stakeholders. Because I think left alone, left in a vacuum, that's what happens. The market does what the market does. And people have different views on Battersea. So I think Earls Court, if I think about my conversations with them, they are very clear that this is a partnership endeavour between the councils. They've got aspirations, objectives. We have, a lot of them will be similar, some not the same. And then it's about internal conversations, thinking about how we most effectively use our levers, be that around licensing, be that around planning, in order to direct this. So part of that strategy is also speaking to our council colleagues to say, when we're thinking about licensing, when we're thinking about nighttime economy, we've got a vision for, alfresco dining, more of a walkway there. Let's think about the levers we use. So this is difficult. This is negotiating stuff, but the first thing is to put that stake in the ground and say, here's what our thinking is, which I guess this is the beginning of it. And I guess, David, the timescales for that production of that strategy in terms of coming back here?
In terms of the timescales, members will note there's the beginnings of a delivery plan towards the end of the report, and we would hope that by spring or summer next year, we will have in place a much firmer strategy that sets this out. So to your point, Councillor Collins, it's less about a lot of ideas and more about a strategy and a plan. So that is where we hope to take in. Your input's really useful in the direction that should take. If I could come back, Chair, as well on the point around brand and promotion, I think that does sit within the comms and the website discussion, which we flagged as something that would be explored as part of destination management plan and partnership. And on the point around what a brand might be, I think there are questions as to whether it is the borough as a whole or whether it's the discrete places within it, which quite possibly as a visitor might have more resonance. So that is all still to be unpacked, and no doubt would form part of how any website or social media campaign would work, and taking on board the comments about Battersea particularly.
I think there's something here about kind of vibrancy across the borough. I mean, the example of Battersea Power Station, that kind of large area under private control, it's singular. Of course, we have kind of key institutions and key visitor attractions in the borough. But things like alfresco dining, as Andrew said, can add a vibrancy to kind of small enabled streets and more intimate kind of localized offer, led by small business. So there's a lot of different strands to interweave here, and make this a kind of a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, in effect.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to come back? Councillor Patel, I think you wanted to come back.
Just a quick one. I think it's dangerous to leave matters in the hands of the market. I think we have a duty to actually listen to the needs and aspirations of the local people as well. Visitors come and go. We live here. And I can give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to a match in Tottenham. And as you know, Tottenham's football stadium is right in the middle of the Broadwater estate. And they were playing Fulham. Then we lost actually 2-0, but it was a good match. But the reason I raise this is because in an area such as Broadwater Farm and its reputation, I didn't see a single person of ethnic origin at the game. And the reason being that the local people have been priced out of going to football matches, just as an example. So I think you can't just leave it to the market. You have to listen to what's affordable to people who live in the borough as well.
Yeah, and I think just on that point, having I know North East London very well and previously worked in Hackney. I know, what that gentrification sort of looks like. And actually one of the conversations John and I have been having, and I've been having with Val and the culture team, is how we take that more interventionist approach to when we're developing this cultural offer, this visitor economy offer, to not just having a sort of vague attempt to reach excluded groups, but really doing something quite bold and ambitious in terms of getting more people who don't normally go to, be it football matches or the theatre, to go there, and working closely with community engagement groups to do that. So that will definitely form part of the plan. I'm sorry, Fulham lost.
Can I just reiterate what fellow councillors said? I think it's sort of like juggling balls, but it's actually two sides of the ball, I think. And I think what I would like to say is that we want this to be the best place to live, bring up a family, work. But we also want it to be the best place to visit as well, whether that be family or whether that be coming to Westfield Shopping Centre or to a hotel, because we're very close to the airport, we're very close to transport links of all sorts. But the question I'd like to reiterate that point, and we've learned a lot, I think, been dealing with, well, I have anyway, dealing with the Olympia project on that, really listening to what the residents want. But I think we ought to be able to explain, though, if we go down this route, what economic benefits, what other benefits are going to be there for the residents as a consequence, but manage it correctly. And the question I was just going to quickly answer is, have you looked at what's going on or what has taken place post the pandemic? Because it has changed patterns of work, it has changed patterns of travel, maybe not forever, but I think it has changed them, like Fridays, traffic's really light around here, eating out and things like that. So I just think it would be worth what you are looking at what's going on with what's it called, a central business district, I think, and how that's moving out, and then what's going on in other cities in this country, but elsewhere in America, Europe. There's some interesting lessons, I think, to be learned about what they're doing at the moment, in places like Holland and so on. Sometimes because you might be creating a load of offices or hotels for no demand. That's what I'm trying to say. So I just wondered, are you going to be looking at some of the implications? There's quite a lot of work going on at the moment in our universities and elsewhere about the impact of the pandemic on sort of economy and stuff.
Really, really useful suggestions. I mean, yes, we gather data. We have subscriptions to things like MasterCard data in order to enable us to track footfall, and we do that. Really helpful suggestion about international links. We have in David's team are responsible for international partnership. I was just in Barcelona with the leader looking at smart cities, but also some things Barcelona do. So we've got those links in to think about what works and to think, as you're suggesting, really quite boldly about doing this very differently. And I know some of the leaders of council are very keen to pursue. But I guess, David, in terms of sort of how are we feeling about the numbers post-pandemic now?
I think it's a really important contextual point to everything that we do, really, given the impacts you've mentioned, Councillor Lang, and it's also something that London and Partners, in sharing its data with us when it does, will be particularly helpful, because they have very clear insight into how particularly international visitors are visiting and visiting differently. So it is something that I think will have to affect what we do here, and in a way it will steer it alongside other data. And I should just add that as part of some of the other international partnerships, and Anderlecht particularly, which members will know, the borough's been twinned with for a number of years as part of our efforts to rejuvenate, if you like, that partnership. One of the key areas they were interested in pursuing and sharing knowledge on was on tourism and the visitor economy, partly because their locality abuts central Brussels, but also stretches right out to the outer limits of the city. So there are some commonalities in terms of the challenges that they face and the opportunities, and similarly to the post-pandemic point, how that's playing out there. So I think we've got some opportunities to learn from elsewhere, but also here in London to get some real hard data to help steer what we do, whether it be through London and Partners or locally.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a few points which sort of build on what we've discussed so far. I mean, I think I would sort of be interested in sort of bringing the strategy back, as you say. I think there's sort of branding or strategy is around, and perhaps Ms. Ranahan might have some comments on this, is it around the localities? We've effectively got sort of, broadly speaking, Shepherd's Bush, Hammersmith and Fulham as locations which are sort of slightly distinct from each other because there's, you know, they're sort of got town centres and they're not sort of close to each other necessarily. So are people staying in Shepherd's Bush, Hammersmith and Fulham, or are they willing to move around the borough to get, I mean, I guess from Hammersmith probably, but what are the linkages there? So I guess, as you've been sort of alluding to, whether we sort of brand things as, you know, you're staying in Shepherd's Bush, Hammersmith, Fulham, or you're staying in the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham is an interesting question as to how you do that from a visitor perspective. So that's one point. I think another point is, I guess, on the branding. I think we've touched on a few points, and there might be others. But often, if you want to think of a place as distinct in your mind, there's often a sort of the home of X. So, I mean, I guess Councillor Lang's mentioned William Morris. Now, I'm afraid more than one place claims to be the home of William Morris. However, I mean, that may be an example from a heritage perspective of, you know, does Hammersmith and Fulham brand itself as the home of William Morris or something else? We've also talked about, you know, the 3 football clubs or something. That might be one way of thinking about it. So there are probably 2 or 3 things where there might be something distinct about Hammersmith and Fulham that might be attractive in a way that visitors then are attracted to it. Either those who stay here for a couple of days and just serendipitously happen upon this, or those who are actually sort of drawn to it by the fact that it is the home of, or something like that, another thing. I mean, I think in terms of diversity and this sort of, I think a lot of what you might hopefully do will also sort of chime with what residents want as well. I'd be interested in, to the extent she wants to comment, Councillor Holder's view on this. As Councillor Lang was mentioning earlier, and as you're well aware, we've put up a lot of blue plaques that are very diverse in the past couple of years, which celebrate the life of ethnic minority characters from throughout the borough's history. I guess we've sort of linked those together, but there are some very significant ones. I'm sorry, they're all significant really, but, you know, Island Records, for example, springs to mind as somewhere that's particularly important as the sort of home of. So there is a sort of potential diversity heritage trail there, which I think we've sort of been working on, but there are some threads that are worth working on, both from a resident and potentially from a visitor point of view. So I'd be interested, as part of that, whether there are some aspects there. I mean, I guess we've also been keen to get a sort of broader heritage, because there's quite a lot of stuff going on, but whether in Hammersmith and Fulham that perhaps hasn't been highlighted as much before, but that could be something that attracts people. I mean, obviously we're competing with Central London in terms of culture, but clearly we've got an offering that people, I guess, hopefully if they were here, you know, staying in Hammersmith and Fulham in one shape or form, there are obviously our theatres and other attractions. And I think the river is certainly something to concentrate on, because, you know, summer's evenings walking down and now from all the way from Putney Bridge to sort of Hammersmith and Chiswick must be an attractive feature. So another set of thoughts. I mean, thinking of my own tourist experience in the south of France, for example, this summer, there's often, now these are perhaps towns that have got an obvious centre and particular heritage, but there is a question about whether, and this might be, as you say, not the council doing this, there's some aspect of heritage that draws people together on a every Thursday night in July and August, for example, that is a sort of thing that brings the, so this may not be a good idea, but that brings people together and either showcases the heritage of Hammersmith and Fulham or showcases something about Hammersmith and Fulham. We've sort of got no end of decent places to host something like that, I guess. Exactly where you might do that and whether it might be in different places within the borough is another question. I mean, and some of this feeds into some of the other things. I mean, certainly one thing, and I'd certainly support the revival of the Shepherd's Bush Comedy Festival. I think that would give us a good basis, particularly on a sort of around summertime, potentially. I guess it used to be in July, which was just before the Edinburgh Festival, and you could get quite a lot of the acts for that at the same time. So, so that's a diverse set of things, but I'll be interested how that all plays out.
Yeah, Andrew wants to come in, but that's just ahead of that. I mean, in terms of having diverse communities, and diverse demand locally. I think that should be absolutely reflected in the visitor economy. Partly because the spend, it's Councillor Lang in the fish restaurant, is equally valuable, whether it's someone who lives beyond our borders or within. But also, the demand for culture and visitor economy and etc. Is similar from incoming people to residents. So, the more visitor economy we have, in a way, kind of more facilities for residents, and many of our existing kind of national world-class facilities are here because they do attract others in, and if it was just left to a local audience, you'd probably be more difficult to sustain. On issues like kind of signage and trails, yes, agreed. I think it celebrates heritage, and it can draw different parts of the borough, different institutions together into kind of what you might think of as a linked trip. So what one of the ideas thinking of is a kind of cultural corridor. You've got Olympia down here as one bookend through to Civic Campus, William Morris House, the Riverside, down King Street, and it can help to rejuvenate King Street and regenerate that area. So there's a lot kind of been done, and more can be done in that respect. On kind of history and heritage, one of the ideas put into the cultural strategy was around a kind of histories plural festival, and that drawing from where this is done other places can be kind of centred on maybe the Civic Campus with a main event. We also have subsidiary events over the kind of week or two leading up to it, different institutions and schools. So you're really kind of building this into the community. And I think the histories is important because quite often people might be interested in the history of buildings or the history of certain famous people, William Morris, and actually bringing these different enthusiasts together, gives that kind of cross-fertilization of what's common to the borough. And I think it's really important in an age where there's a lot of revision and rethinking of our national history, and I think and having that local sense of history and that local connection, I think is really, really important, bringing community together and having kind of that sense of one H&F. So that is an idea, as I said, in the cultural strategy. So one that should be taken forward.
It was only to add that we will be thinking carefully. We are ready about what our key strengths, what our key assets are, and making the most of those. The way other boroughs, Merton have recently making a big deal out at home of Wimbledon. We've got a host, almost an embarrassment of Richard, as you talking about, but there's almost therefore more need to really hone and think about what is really going to draw the users in. So yeah, that'll be a big part of what we are doing over the coming months, and of course we'll come back and continue to work with you on this.
Yeah, of course.
I just wanted to add that there is a really, the cultural history here is actually very connected, the histories. And I think, having lived here all my life, the music is one of the most important aspects of this area. We used to have really good clubs, lots of where musicians could come and play. And that's why we ended up having lots of diverse musicians coming here, living here, getting involved, because we had venues, and then the venues got kind of cleansed into places which just pump alcohol. And it's a bit sad, really. So, I mean, it was a different time, that's true. But I do think that if you've got those, that's one of the reasons why people will travel to East London, because they can see a live band. They haven't been priced out of a venue over there. And it was one of the things that held the community together here. So the music at that time, when we had those venues, it was all different types of musicians were there. And it connected the community. So it's something that's part of the history, which is very real here.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's a point made by the leader about kind of East London having kind of certain coolness, I guess. So I probably sound quintessentially middle-aged when I say that, but and Hammersmith used to, and kind of trying to regain that, and thinking through how kind of development planning policies can help provide that kind of venue, which, as you say, is really important, not just for our cultural offer, but for our communities.
Councillor Holder.
To be quite truthful, I think Councillor Collins hit the nail on the head in terms of people's thinking at the moment. It is slightly disconnected. However, I feel I can reassure you all that actually those pieces are there. It's a bit like a game of chess at the moment. You know, we just haven't quite got them in the right place, and we are getting there. But I do welcome the suggestion about gathering the businesses and the hotels and the conference centre organisers together, because that is something that I think will be a key to those visitors, to our visitor economy, bringing those people here. You have more international connections certainly than I have, probably, but it's actually advertising what is happening in whatever part of the borough somebody wants to stay in. And it's advertising that and making sure that people know that when they come here, they don't have to get on a train to go into central London to do anything. We've got the Lyric Hammersmith here. We've got, you know, the smaller Barons Court theatres. If you're Asian, we've got the Bevan Centre. We've got lots. And quite frankly, it is already here, but we need to let people know that. And that's my point, where the pieces are all there, but we just haven't quite got them connected yet in the way that you would like to see them in a branded format. But we are getting there, promise.
Thank you. Mr. Ranhan, did you want to add anything further to this conversation? I know that you were about what you've heard tonight.
It was extremely interesting. I mean, I just want to say for us, we sell Hammersmith as a destination. Of course, business where we're located, but we're extremely cognizant of the fact of what Fulham and Shepherd's Bush have to offer as well. And we really, really work on promoting what is in your local area to offer to our guests. Like you said, not getting on a train, not going, of course, they come to see certain things. So for the majority of our guests that come and stay with us, this is their destination for the most part. But we really work on trying to promote what's in the local area, use the services, and there's a huge amount to offer here. It's absolutely huge. And I think one of the best things about here is the accessibility, the transport links. There isn't really a need to stay. You could stay here and get to every place. So it's fantastic. The services here are great. The offerings, the shopping, the food, that is what's so great. It is so diverse. And our clients are very diverse. And that's what they like about coming to this area, is that there is something for everybody, whether that be to the river, whether it be down to King Street, whether it be moving a little bit more towards Fulham or going to Shepherd's Bush. It's extremely eclectic mix. And, you know, we'll be very happy to support any initiatives to make sure that that remains, but obviously new initiatives as well that bring business into the area.
I think you might have hit on a quite good strap line of something for everybody, but we'll no doubt take that forward in due course. And no, thank you very much for that. It's very interesting. So I think we've come to the end of this conversation, but thank you very much for the presentation and the report. There's probably too many individual items to sum up. I mean, I guess we're interested in, obviously, the visitor economy, obviously also benefiting residents as much as possible, but I think we've sort of seen that as a thread through there. I think Councillor Holder has summed some of this up pretty neatly in terms of, I think there are some pieces. It's really a question of putting them together. I think probably looking a bit more at the data that you'll get in the next several months to understand a bit more about the types of visitors we've got will also help in terms of understanding the sort of way that we might, you know, take forward branding of Hammersmith and Fulham in one way, shape or form. But I think we'd be hopefully able to take away some of the ideas from tonight and also the other stuff that you're working on in putting together the strategy. And we look forward to seeing it again and having a further discussion in a few months' time when it's more developed. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So. We'll just, well, not adjourn, we'll just give officers a minute or so to change in advance of the next item. Okay, so moving on to item number 5, which is the review of the performance of the new household waste collection contract, implementation of the wheel bin and food waste collection. So we've got our 3 presenting officers, Annie Baker, Bram Kainth and Mark Reisbeck. So it's over to you. So I should say we'll invite residents forward later to ask questions if that's okay. Not now, but we'll once we've done the presentation and some of the questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much for having us today. I've got slides, which I don't know if those will appear. Anyway.
Hang on, working this. All right. Just. Okay. No, that's not the right one. Number 1, 2, 3. Oh, so okay. It's just. We'll get there in a second. Did you want to start, and we'll hopefully we'll catch up with the slides in a moment.
Sure. So I'm here tonight to talk about, as you've said, the review of the new household waste collection contract, and then the implementation of wheel bins and food waste collection through that contract. So thank you very much for having us. So the new contract started in January this year. We had a procurement strategy back in the summer of 2021. We had a competitive dialogue process that we went through for the procurement. We awarded the contract autumn of 2022, and we started at the end of January this year. So we're in the earliest stages of the new contract. And that's, you know, some context really in terms of the background. The benefits of the contract are set out in the report, and they are primarily looking at improvements to our recycling rates, and we'll come on to some of the big service changes we're making that will really assist in driving those rates up. We're currently around sort of 25%-ish recycling rates, which is something we'd really like to improve, and the new services will really assist with that. In terms of street cleaning, we expect improvements, particularly around fly tipping and the speed at which we clear fly tips. And I'll come on to the performance in the presentation, but weeding is another area where we've changed how that is being delivered, and we're seeing improvements already. We're expecting that we will have better performance information as well through the new contract. We will have a management information system, and for the first time, everything will be digital, which will mean information can get much quicker from either being reported by ourselves, the contractor themselves, residents will get directly to where it needs to go to make sure that work is actioned and that we've got good performance information in terms of where services are needed and how quickly they're being completed. We've also got benefits that relate to climate and the council's agenda in terms of reaching net zero. We've built in quite a bit of flexibility around the sorts of vehicles that might be procured during the life of the contract. A refuse collection vehicle is a really heavy piece of kit, and it needs to be able to get itself around the borough, and it needs to carry quite a lot of waste as well, and it needs to have, you know, compaction on that vehicle as well, which requires a lot of energy. So we've made sure that we've got the flexibility in the contract that as charging mechanisms, charging infrastructure, the battery lives and so on improve, that we will be able to take advantage of that and not commit to a certain type of vehicle right at the start and then be wedded to that, which is obviously important that we're able to move as technology develops. And social value is an important part of this contract as well, with the contractor committing more than 10% of the value of the contract, which is a requirement of the council. In terms of performance to date, and we're now in about 9 months into the service performance, a key factor for us is miscollections in terms of waste collection. That's what residents experience around having their refuse and recycling collected. You can see in this chart, the blue line is the previous year's performance and the red bars are the current year's performance. We were really pleased with the mobilisation of the new contract. It was a short period and there's an awful lot for a new provider to organise, and much of the workforce obviously transfers and a new employer comes in and needs to build relationships, get the work going seamlessly. We immediately saw an improvement in miscollections compared to the year previously. Miscollections are quite seasonal, the work does follow a pattern through the year, but we saw an immediate improvement which was sustained. We've had 2 periods where it's been higher than we would have liked when the beginnings of the new management information system, which is some in-cab technology, were introduced. We saw an increase in June in the miscollections as the sort of reporting bedded in. And then in September, we changed our collection rounds. We didn't change people's collection days, but we did change how the rounds were organised. It's a really important part of the new service system. Will make us more resilient to collect materials in vehicles that are dedicated for the materials we're collecting. So we now have dedicated refuse vehicles, dedicated recycling vehicles, but because the crews are obviously learning new routes, and although the collection days don't change, if we're driving new routes, then we are arriving at a different time of day. The time at which they might drive to tip would change, the time that they're hitting traffic would change, the direction that they're going, etc. So people who might have had an early morning collection might now be mid-morning, and people do get used to roughly when the crews are coming. So although we don't promise a time of collection, that change does mean some people may be putting waste out a little later, and now the collection's already happened, for example. And also the crews are learning new routes, new layouts, new the sort of where somebody might leave the waste that might not be immediately obvious from the gate post. So for that reason, we did see higher miscollections in September. Those have come right down in October. We're expecting a further reduction in November. And as I say, the service will be more resilient as a result of that change. But we want to see that improvement and the bedding in of that happening very quickly, which we are seeing so far. And then for street cleaning, for weeding, we previously were doing 2 tranches of weeding around the borough. So we've got over 800 streets in the borough. Every street was getting at least 2 visits, but now it's at least 3. And in terms of the amount of feedback we get from residents and reports of weeding that needs attention, we had 99 reports last year versus 54 reports this year. So that has come right down. There is some variation year on year, and it depends on, if you get a lot of rainy days followed by a lot of sunny days, you can end up with very sudden weed growth in some areas that needs to be kept on top of. But we've introduced new kit. We've got quite a lot of strimming of weeds now. We don't use any chemicals for weed spraying, and that's worked really well so far. So we're really pleased with how that has gone this year. For litter and detritus, which detritus is the sort of not litter, but things like leaves or blossom that might have broken down, the sort of small scale dirt on the streets, so which is dealt with through sweeping rather than litter, which is often picked with a litter picker. We've seen in tranche 1 and 2, and we usually do have 3 tranches each year, and they're independently assessed. In both tranches, we've been well above the levels that we expect in terms of good performance, and an improvement on where we were in tranche 3 of last year. And we're expecting that will be sustained, and keeping a very close eye on that, but so far so good. We have had, for fly tip clearance, 90% have been cleared within 48 hours and 2/3 within 24 hours. And we're expecting that will improve further with the digital systems that will mean that reported information gets to crews more quickly. Previously, we were clearing around half within 24 hours and 3/4. So it's an immediate improvement again. I come on now to delivering the new services, which we started rolling out on the 6th of November. So I've got an update in the slides further to the report when we submitted that a little while ago. So just a little bit of background on the new service. I know we came and spoke previously around the prototype service, which we've been running for 3 years now in several parts of the borough, and it's around 6,000 homes that take part in that service, and it's allowed us to really thoroughly test the new services and really has helped us to plan how we roll this out, and that work is underway, as I say, now. So in the new service, everybody will have a food waste recycling container. This is a service for our street-based properties, and almost everybody has space for, it's a small sort of so high outdoor caddy with an indoor caddy for kitchen waste and some liners provided to get people started on the service. And then where there is suitable, accessible outdoor space, we're also providing people with 2 wheel bins. One is for refuse, it's a black bin, 140 litres in size, and the other bin is for recycling, which is a green bin, and that's 240 litres in size. But we do have different sizes of bins available. We know from those prototype areas that there have been lots of different permutations that have worked for residents, sometimes sharing, particularly where there are communal buildings split into multiple occupancy dwellings, but all sorts of setups. And we've worked with residents to provide smaller bins or allow sharing, or larger bins that are shared to meet what need exists. The next slide, I've got some detail here on the implementation. And the key thing for us with the new service is that we know it will help us increase the recycling rates, because the rates have gone up significantly in the prototype areas. We know that it supports a cleaner street because we have many fewer sacks that are vulnerable to being ripped open by pests, and it's safer for the crews as well. So in terms of the manual handling that the crews are needing to do, and also helping to prevent stick injuries from sharp objects in bags as well. So we've communicated with all residents. People were in receipt of a flyer that went through doors towards the end of the summer, just to let people know that the service change was coming. Prior to the deliveries taking place in any area, we're writing to residents. It's a sort of a printed envelope that's got some information on the outside of the envelope as well, to try to avoid just being sort of chucked into the bin, and it's an addressed letter so that it hopefully gets attention, to let people know the details of the service, what's happening. We're always organising drop-in events for each phase of delivery, so that there's somewhere people can come face to face, and we've got a dedicated email address that people can contact if they've got any concerns or questions in advance of the deliveries. We're making sure we've always got managers present for the deliveries, both from the council and from the contractor, just to check that the quality of the work is good, and that we're happy that we're only delivering bins where there is suitable space and the bins can be emptied and the bins can be stored safely. We're engaging with residents associations wherever we can. We've got some additional resource being provided by Veolia to help ensure that we're as responsive as possible. And the speed of the rollout is being dictated by any engagement work that we need to do, and making sure we've got the capacity to engage. So we're taking each phase as we go, and we are working to make sure that we get the services bedded in, rather than to a fixed timetable with deadlines that would be the driver to the pace that we work at. We want to make sure we spend the time to talk to people and get the service right. So far, we started on the 6th of November with the deliveries that we're undertaking in this phase. Since then, we've delivered wheel bins to around 2,000 households, and around 500 homes didn't have space for wheel bins and have had just the food waste containers. So far, about 100 homes have contacted us to request the collection of their old bins, and we're offering a free service to collect and then recycle the old dustbins. If people can find a different use for them, or somebody else who would like to use the bins, that's definitely the best thing that can happen. But we're very happy to take those away where people no longer have a use for them. And so far, 48 homes have requested different sizes of bins. So, we're making sure we respond quickly there. We do want people to try the bins, and if people are uncertain about the sort of size that they need, there's no sort of deadline to get in touch and swap the bins over. We'd rather people try the bins. Obviously, the food waste does mean that you've maybe got less refuse once you start using the new service than you would otherwise have had. So we're really keen that we people take the time to work out what they might want. And you know, over Christmas, people will often find they've got more waste and might really value the space that they've got in the wheel bins. Other people will be confident they want a smaller bin, and we can do those swaps nice and quickly. Looking ahead, we're going to continue the rollout through to the spring approximately in 2024, pace dictated, as I say, by the amount of engagement work that we're doing as we go. We're then looking ahead in 2024 to bringing the food waste service to our estates and places with communal bins. Those services need different levels of resource and communication around how we introduce those, but every bin store is different, just like almost every front garden is different. So we'll be making sure that service works in all of the locations that we introduce the service to. And we're already talking to colleagues in housing to make sure that we're well prepared. And we're looking at a garden waste service as well, potentially in 2024, to help recycle that other separate stream of waste. So yeah, watch this space.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's very clear. Councillors, Councillor Vaughan, you want to go first? Yeah.
Thanks very much. I've got a few questions. One of the things I was thinking about with the smaller bins, I thought, and this is, forgive me if I just don't understand how these things work, I thought the whole point is that the truck picks up a certain height of bin, therefore smaller bin can't pick it up, or it can pick it up.
So usually that's right. Regardless of the volume of the bin, the height of the bin is usually approximately about 110 centimetres, but we have found a bin that's 93 centimetres tall and only slightly smaller in volume. It's 120 litres rather than 140. We've tested it on the vehicle hoists and it has been safe to pick up and collect.
Okay, so skinnier rather than squatter.
It is a little bit, it is about 17 centimetres shorter as well. And so our hope, we've ordered some of those, and our hope is that we will try them for residents who would like a shorter bin. They are a little bit smaller, so they do need to be workable. And we again, it will be another offer that we have to residents to try and accommodate as many different needs as we can.
Well, it's great to have those options. And also, it's fantastic to hear that we're improving in recycling, and I'm sure there's still a way to go. But I just wondering if you had any numbers around, because you're talking about the fact that you saw in the prototype that we had increased levels of recycling. Is that all recycling, or was it the food waste? Do you have the numbers? I didn't see it. Maybe I might have missed the numbers in the report, but
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I can provide them. But in general terms, we did see the food waste obviously was a really significant contribution to the increase in recycling rate, but we also saw more recycling. And generally, the smaller refuse bin and the slightly larger recycling bin is a nudge, as well as, we want to provide a good service and make it easy to recycle, but the recycling bin hopefully makes it easier to recycle. It means there's a space that you haven't got to keep things indoors. You can put things straight into the bin. It will hold the sort of cardboard packaging that people quite often get now with the more and more online deliveries and so on. And it's an outdoor container, which is convenient from the perspective of not having to keep things in the house waiting for a collection, for example. Quite a good capacity for holding quite a lot of recycling. So we did see the dry recycling increase as well as the food, but the food is a significant component too.
I'm personally, I don't think that I will have, I don't have space for the big bins, but I am looking forward to trying out food recycling. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about it in July and August in the hotter months, but I'm very happy to give it a go. And just one last thing that I feel it's been slightly unclear, and it's come up a lot on the doorstep actually, and it is a worry for residents when we talk about suitability of having the bins. And this is just kind of if you come to my home and I don't deem it to be suitable, but you do deem it to be suitable, what happens? Can I ultimately refuse? Can I refuse it, or?
Almost every front garden is different, and people's use of their front garden varies so much. What we found in the prototype was that when people gave the bins a try, and then we worked with them, whether it was smaller bins or sharing bins, we almost always found a solution. We don't want to do things like, block somebody's cycle storage, or some people have got, lots of floral displays and beautiful pots and so on. We're not asking anybody to change any of those things. If there's no space for the bins and they can't be safely stored, then we're not delivering bins. But we're hoping that on a sort of one-to-one basis, and that's what we've set out the time to do, is to have those conversations and hopefully find solutions in the vast majority of cases. And what we're really asking residents to do is to try the containers, have the discussion with us. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be present, looking at how the service is working, and we're confident we can find solutions where there are issues. And we won't deliver bins in places where it's not suitable. And as a result, as you've seen from the data we've got so far, we've had very few people contacting us even to swap the sizes of bins.
But just to kind of play devil's advocate, if I just say I don't want the bin, even if I do have space, even if I don't have florals, but I don't want the bin, and I deem it to be unsuitable, maybe because I think it looks ugly, or it's for whatever reason, it's my front garden. Is that a possibility? Can I refuse it?
Well, we'll ask you to try it, and if at this stage it's not possible, we'll come back and call again in a period of time after we've done the bulk of the rollout and speak again.
Can I just say that we're not here to be policemen as such.
No,
we're there to work with the residents. So if you were absolutely adamant that you didn't want the bins, and then we wouldn't leave the bins there. But as Annie said, from experience, that typically at the moment delivering about 1,000 bins a week. There's probably only 2 or 3 that we've got those sort of more, should we say, challenging conversations, and some of those will try them, some of those will refuse to try them. But I think when they see, our hope is when they see how their neighbours are using them and so forth, if they've got space, that they will also wish to try them. And so we're working through a process of encouragement and engagement rather than diktat as such.
Perfect. No, I'm sure most people will want to give them a try. It is something that has come up on the doorstep, whether it's a new requirement or whether it's a choice.
Our experience is the majority do want to give it a try. In fact, delivering them, the vast majority of comments are favourable about welcoming them rather than disfavourable. But so there's a wide variety of views and opinions. That's the reality of any change, and that's why we're engaging with people a lot to listen and understand. Because, as I say, while some people will welcome them, there will be a number of people who won't, and so it's important to listen and understand what their concerns are, and see if we can work around those concerns and ultimately them to be happy with the service.
Yeah, well, because there also might be, physical reasons, if you don't have the strength, or it may not just be, I don't have the space, it might be. But it's really good to hear that you're working with people. So thank you.
We offer an assisted collection service, for instance, which we're promoting as part of the rollout. So, that there are a whole range of things we can do to help the service bed in for people. And that's why we will want to talk to people and find out what the issues are and solve them where we can.
Great, thank you. I'm looking forward to getting my bin, my caddy, my food bin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins.
A lot of people that in my area, they're very happy about the bins. They just and especially the communication seems to have been good. There's a couple of things that happen though, and I think it's just to do with, like you said, the people getting used to the area, the collection people, and as a result, there's been miscollections. And then that person gets fined for having rubbish there. And then there's some rubbish there. And then everybody that walks past puts their rubbish on it as they just pass. So in these kind of these very special niche 2 or 3 areas,